The first thing I remember was the sound. Not the sirens. Not the shouting. The sound of hooves on asphalt. Slow. Deliberate. Heavy enough to echo. I was lying on a stretcher outside my farmhouse when the ambulance doors swung open and the paramedics tried to load me in. The late afternoon sun burned against my eyelids. Everything smelled like cut hay and diesel fumes. My chest felt like someone had parked a truck on top of it. Then the ambulance stopped moving. Someone swore. And my horse exhaled. I knew that breath anywhere. Copper. He had planted himself squarely in front of the open ambulance doors, massive chest blocking the entrance like a living barricade. Ears forward. Muscles tight. Not panicked. Protective. "Sir, we need the animal moved," one of the paramedics said, trying to keep his voice calm. I tried to lift my head. The world spun. My pulse hammered in my ears. "He won't hurt you," I rasped. "He just doesn't like strangers." That wasn't entirely true. Copper had seen strangers before. Ranch hands. Neighbors. Kids who wanted to feed him carrots. He'd never blocked anyone from coming or going. But this was different. The sirens were still flashing, red light bouncing off his chestnut coat. The strobe made him look like he was on fire. One paramedic stepped forward cautiously, palm out. Copper didn't rear. Didn't kick. He just stepped closer to the doors and lowered his head, nostrils flaring at the interior of the ambulance. Like he was smelling something. "Sir, if we can't move him, we'll have to sedate him," the other paramedic said. Sedate him. The word cut through the fog in my brain sharper than the pain in my ribs. "No," I croaked. "Don't you dare." I tried to sit up and a white-hot spike shot through my side. I collapsed back onto the stretcher. The sky above me blurred into streaks of pale blue. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be inside my house, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, watching dust float through the window light. Instead I was on my back, barely breathing, while my horse refused to let them close the doors. I heard boots on gravel. A deputy's voice. The soft metallic click of something unholstered. "You're not shooting my horse?" I said louder than I meant to. It came out like a growl. "No one's shooting anything," the deputy said, though I could hear the uncertainty under it. Copper took another step forward and pressed his muzzle against the stretcher. His whiskers brushed my hand. Warm. Solid. Alive. His eye rolled toward the ambulance interior again. And then he backed up. Not much. Just enough to let the paramedics wheel me forward. They moved fast. As soon as they tried to lift the stretcher into the ambulance, Copper lunged back in front, slamming his shoulder against the doorframe. The entire vehicle rocked. "Jesus!" someone yelled. The doors banged against the hinges. The paramedic inside stumbled backward. Copper wasn't wild. He was deliberate. Blocking. I saw it then. He wasn't reacting to me. He was reacting to the inside of the ambulance. "Hold on," I whispered. No one heard me. They were arguing now. The deputy stepped closer, hand resting on his sidearm. The paramedic who had suggested sedation was already reaching for something in his bag. Copper's breathing quickened. I could see the pulse in his neck. He knew something. And I trusted him more than I trusted the men in uniform standing around me. "Wait," I said again, louder this time. My voice cracked, but it carried. "Let me look." "You need immediate transport," one paramedic said. "Your vitals are unstable." "Let me look," I repeated. Reluctantly, they tilted the stretcher so I could see into the ambulance. The interior was bright. Too bright. Harsh fluorescent light reflecting off white cabinets and stainless steel rails. And something else. The smell. Faint. Metallic. Sweet. Not mine. Not hay or blood from the ranch. Coppa's ears pinned flat. That smell. I'd smelled it before. Years ago. Overseas. It hit me like a memory grenade. Burned wiring. Chemical residue. I swallowed. "Who was in here before me?" I asked. The paramedic hesitated. Just for a second. "Car accident victim," he said. "Transferred at county." Something in his tone didn't sit right. Copper shifted again, stamping once. Not panicked. "Warning. Open the floor compartment," I said. "What?" "The storage compartment. Under the bench." They stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "I was a combat engineer," I said, forcing air into my lungs. "IED disposal. You want to get me to the hospital alive? Open it." Silence stretched. The deputy looked at the paramedic. The paramedic looked back at him. Then, with visible annoyance, the paramedic stepped inside and knelt. He lifted the latch. The smell intensified immediately. Even from where I lay, I could feel it clawing into my nose. The paramedic froze. "What the hell is that?" he muttered. He reached inside and pulled out a small black pouch. Unmarked. Not standard issue. My vision tunneled. "That's not yours," I said. "No," he admitted. The deputy stepped closer. "Open it." The paramedic hesitated. Copper stamped again, louder this time. The zipper rasped open. Inside were 2 glass vials wrapped in gauze. Clear liquid. No labels. Even from the stretcher, I saw the deputy's face change. "That's not medical," he said quietly. "No," I whispered. "It's not." My chest burned. My pulse pounded in my temples. I wasn't just sick. I had collapsed in my barn after drinking water from a thermos I'd left on the workbench. A thermos I hadn't touched since the night before. A thermos someone else had access to. The deputy's radio crackled. He stepped away, speaking low. The paramedic stood frozen, pouch in hand. "I didn't put that there," he said quickly. Too quickly. Kappa's head lifted high. The air felt electric. Suddenly the sirens weren't just background noise. They were alarms. Because if those vials had made it inside the hospital with me, if something had been administered quietly during transport, a 72-year-old veteran with a heart condition doesn't raise many questions when he dies in transit. Especially one who had just filed a formal complaint. That part they didn't know yet. I hadn't told anyone about the meeting scheduled for the next morning. About the land surveyors. About the documents proving that the county's new development plan overlapped with protected veterans' land grants issued decades ago. My land. And several others. I'd been quiet for weeks. Collecting proof. Making copies. Calling old contacts who still owed me favors. I had fought wars for this country. I wasn't about to let a quiet zoning decision erase what little we'd been promised. But I hadn't expected this. The deputy came back, face pale. "We're calling state investigators," he said. "Nobody goes anywhere." The paramedic's hands shook. "You think I don't think anything," the deputy cut in. "But we're not moving this vehicle." Copper relaxed slightly. Just slightly. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the gravel driveway. My breathing grew shallower. The edges of my vision pulsed dark. Ironically, the delay might kill me anyway. The deputy knelt beside me. "Sir, we're going to call another ambulance from the next county over," he said. "But it'll take time." Time. I didn't have much of that. Copper lowered his head to my chest. I felt the steady warmth of his breath through my shirt. "I'm not done yet," I murmured to him. He flicked an ear. The second ambulance arrived 40 minutes later. Different crew. Different uniforms. State troopers behind them. They examined the first vehicle carefully. Bagged the pouch. Questioned everyone. I drifted in and out. I remember being lifted again. This time Copper didn't block the door. He stood back watching. Still. Alert. The ride to the hospital was a blur of flashing lights and oxygen masks. My heart stuttered once. Maybe twice. Someone shouted numbers. I remember thinking how strange it was that the one creature who couldn't speak had been the only one who listened. I woke up 2 days later in a quiet hospital room. The first thing I saw was sunlight on the window. The second was a state investigator sitting in a chair by the bed. "You're lucky," he said. I didn't feel lucky. "The vials tested positive for a high-dose potassium compound," he continued. "Injected intravenously, it would have looked like natural cardiac arrest." My throat went dry. "The paramedic?" I asked. "Under investigation. We've uncovered financial ties between him and a contracting firm bidding on that development project you filed against." I closed my eyes. There it was. Not a villain monologue. Not a dramatic confession. Just paperwork. Bank transfers. Quiet coordination. Efficient. Almost successful. "If your horse hadn't delayed the transport," the investigator said softly, "those vials might have disappeared before anyone noticed." I pictured Kappa's shoulder slamming against the ambulance door. His nostrils flaring. His ears pinned. He had smelled it. The chemical trace. The stress. The wrongness. Animals don't care about politics. Or land disputes. Or legal filings. They care about their herd. And I was his. When I was discharged a week later, the driveway was crowded. Neighbors. Local reporters. Veterans from 2 counties over. Word had spread. Not about me. About the horse. Copper stood in the pasture, tail swishing lazily. Sunlight caught in his mane. When I stepped through the gate, he walked straight to me and pressed his forehead against my chest. The same spot that had nearly stopped beating. I ran my hand along his neck. "You stubborn old fool," I whispered. He huffed softly. The investigation dragged on for months. Charges were filed. Contracts suspended. The development plan stalled indefinitely. I testified. My voice steady. I told the truth. But every time someone asked how it had been uncovered, I thought of hooves on asphalt. Of a body planted in a doorway. Of a creature who couldn't read a bank statement but knew the scent of danger. I've been called a hero in my life. I've worn medals I didn't think I deserved. But lying on that stretcher, helpless and breathless, I wasn't a soldier. I was just a man whose heart was failing. And it was my horse who stood guard. People like to believe loyalty is loud. That it announces itself with grand gestures and dramatic words. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it looks like muscle and bone blocking a door. Sometimes it sounds like hooves striking pavement in steady defiance. I don't know how much time I have left. The doctors speak in careful tones now. More monitoring. More medication. But every morning I sit on the porch with a cup of black coffee, and copper grazes within sight. The light hits the fields the same way it did the day everything almost ended. And I think about the thin line between silence and truth. Between accident and intention. Between life and the quiet efficiency of a sealed ambulance door. Justice didn't arrive with sirens that day. It arrived with breath and instinct and a body that refused to move. Loyalty doesn't ask questions. It doesn't need evidence. It simply stands where it must, even when the world tells it to step aside. And sometimes that is enough to keep a heart beating.